Did you live in Enfield when you first came to the football club?
I did. I lived in Bushell Park.
And what was the first match that you remember?
Well, I can't remember who we were playing, but I do remember that I was taken along by my father. He tried to take me to a Spurs game. It was in the glory days when they were getting 60,000 crowds, and when we arrived, they pushed all the young boys towards the front, and I could see virtually nothing. And I remember one game we went to, and Bobby Smith was supposed to have scored a spectacular overhead kick, but I remember nothing about it because all I was just surrounded by people who were much taller than me. I was only about 7 at the time. So my father said, well, let's just try our local amateur team, see how we get on there. And that's how we started supporting Enfield. And from there on, I think for the next 10 years, I saw most games.
Andy, what about you? Did you live in Enfield when you first came to the...
I lived in Winchmore Hill.
And what do you remember the first match you attended?
I think the first game I attended was Enfield versus Tottenham in a friendly game to commemorate their new floodlights, which was, 1962.
And Paul, why did you go in the first place?
Why did I go? Well, I was keen on playing football, just kicking a ball around with my friends. And my father, who I've already said, took me along, and he was very sporty, and I was taking an interest. And it was good to see live football. I'd seen a little bit on the television, but in those days it was, of course, black and white and a fairly grainy picture. And it was great to be able to see live people playing the live game. Very exciting.
Andy, what about you? Why did you go in the first place?
I think I'd seen FA Cup Finals on television. I vaguely remember the Munich air crash when I was very young, and I was obviously excited by the thought of football. And it was. I think I started at Enfield Grammar with Ken and Paul, and off I went to Enfield too, and it was great fun.
Paul, what's being a football fan given to you?
Oh gosh, a lot of pleasure and a lot of pain over the years. I think being an England fan has given me possibly more pain than pleasure, with a little bit of pleasure in 1966. I stayed an Enfield fan from the age of about 8 to 18, and as I say, I saw most of their games during that time. They were at the top of the amateur game in those days, and so we were winning far more than we were losing, and that was always a pleasure, and it was exciting. And it was the friendship group was helped by our common interest in football. But I mean, since those days, it's just, if I took away the number of hours that I've spent watching football live and on television, I think I'd be able to spend a lifetime.
Andy, what about you? What's football given to you?
Well, I agree with Paul that a lot of times they say that football, generally, as a supporter, you have a lot of down moments, but with occasional highs. But it has given me a lot of fun. I've played a lot and watched a lot. It's great socially, I think. It's good for you. You get out in the fresh air. It's good from a physical point of view. But it's the entertainment. It's just great pleasure. And I think it also reflects human nature a great deal, football, and watching football and seeing how the players behave and conduct themselves. So I think it's fascinating.
Do you still live in Enfield?
I live in Potter's Bar, so close by. So I can get to Enfield very easily.
And that's what makes you come back to Enfield, particularly for football?
Well, I don't watch Enfield these days much. I do follow their results. So when I come down to Enfield, it's to see friends and shopping and that sort of thing. So
Paul, who was your favourite player?
It has to be Tommy Lawrence. When I first started watching in the late 50s, he was scoring a lot of goals, and I think it may have been the first season that I started watching them. Enfield were drawn against Hoddesdon in the FA Cup qualifiers, and they scored 15 goals, of which Tommy Lawrence scored 7. I was still sitting with my father in the stand and watch those go in, and from that day on he was always my favourite.
And Andy, what about you? Who was your favourite player?
Well, it's difficult to pinpoint one particular player. I'm afraid by the time I started watching, Tommy Lawrence had already succumbed to the injury. So there are lots of players. There's people like Alf Darcy, I thought was a fantastic player. John Connell was always great fun because he scored so many goals. But there were people like Joe Adams, he was a great player. I always remember Ian Reid, coming up and scoring those headers from corners from his full-back position. So there's so many players really.
What's your most memorable match and why?
Very difficult again to pinpoint a particular game. I do remember the Cup Finals. I do remember the great disappointment of the Crook Town game when they lost that. It was wonderful when they won the replay against Skelmersdale up at Main Road. That was a great game. Funnily enough, one of the games I really remember was the semi-final of the Amateur Cup against Kingstonian at Fulham. I think that was before they played Crook Town, and that was just a wonderful moment because when they scored that goal, I seem to remember Tony Edwards scoring the winning goal, and it was just wonderful to think that Enfield were at Wembley in the Amateur Cup final.
Paul, what was your most memorable match and why?
I think probably would have to be the two games against Skelmersdale. I remember that in the season that Skelmersdale got to the final against Enfield, Liverpool and Everton had both been knocked out of the FA Cup fairly early on, so a lot of Liverpool-based people had decided to start supporting Skelmersdale, so they actually came to Wembley with a lot of support. And of course, Enfield being much closer to Wembley, we carried our own support, and it was a very exciting game, made even more exciting by the award of the penalty in the last minute or two, and then of course it being saved, and then the replay at Main Road, which I think we both went to, and 3-0 to Enfield, and that is very memorable.
Okay. What memories have you got of Southbury Road?
Oh, when I first started going with my father, we sat in the stand. I was 7 or 8 years old, something like that, and saw some great games. Enfield started to go from being quite a mediocre team in the Athenian League to a top team in the Athenian League. A little bit later on, I think probably because my father wanted to spend more time in the bar than he was able to with his two young sons, he sent me and my older brother over to stand on the terraces on the other side, and we were still quite young. I think I was probably about 8 or 9 when we started standing there, and I remember my mother, being health conscious, always packed us an apple, which we had to have at half time. We were under strict instructions. None of the traditional footballing pies for us, it had to be an apple. And then of course a little bit later on, I think my brother stopped going because he went off to uni, and I joined the friends at the grammar school, and we always stood at the end. And I remember standing behind the goal, and of course at half time in those days, and possibly still today, I don't know, we'd all troop down from one end to the other so that we'd all stand behind the goal where Enfield were shooting. And it was very intimate. It was a small, intimate and lovely little ground, which I've got very fond memories of.
Andy, what memories have you got of Southbury Road?
Yeah, I agree with Paul that one of the main memories of it is that how close you were to the pitch. So you felt very close to the action, and it was good fun joining up with our friends behind the goal and strolling round at half time.
And you could have conversations with the players sometimes. They were taking a throw on, and they would actually turn around and reply to you.
Throw a few remarks at the opposition supporters as they're walking along as well. It was very good. One of the memories I remember very early on of football was the smell of tobacco smoke coming from, I think it was pipes. A lot of the men that was sitting in the stands used to smoke pipes. So I always used to have this memory of football, what was going on the pitch, and this smell of cigarette smoke from pipe tobacco. But the action was very exciting, and as we said, Enfield were very successful in that period, so it was great fun to watch them win matches and stand with your friends.
When you went to away games, did you travel on supporters coach?
Yes, quite often I did.
Any particular memories of trips on the coaches?
I can't remember any major
No.
thoughts, really.
No.
I remember when I went to Main Road, we went by coach, and that was a long journey. But obviously for the league games, it was much nearer. But
An eventful game was at Highgate in '67 in the Storm. What do you remember of the Highgate match?
it's funny because we had a chat, didn't we,
Yes.
before this, and I wasn't sure whether my memories of that day were necessarily that accurate, but we both agree that it was a very unpleasant day weather-wise. It was very grey, it was absolutely pouring with rain, but it wasn't a storm. When we got there, when the match took place, it was absolutely pouring with rain, but both of us can only remember one flash of lightning, and that was unfortunately the flash of lightning that hit the pitch and hit the players. And I don't remember any lightning after that either.
No, well, I don't remember either. I mean, it was literally a bolt from the blue. And, it was. I can remember to this day how loud the crowd. I mean, the lightning and the thunder were simultaneous, which you never see.
And
of course,
everyone was looking straight at what was happening.
the ball was close by, and I think in front of us that we saw instantly 5 or 6 players fall to the ground. The only time in my life I've seen anybody actually hit by lightning, and of course sadly one person died, I think the next day.
Yeah, I remember not only steam rising, but also some smoke as well. And just straight away the game just stopped. Everyone I think was just in a state of shock.
I was going to say, what was the aftermath of that like?
Well, as I say, I don't remember being worried that it was going to happen again. That may have been the case, but I just think everyone was just completely shocked by what had happened. Totally taken aback.
I remember the coach journey back being almost silent. Nobody could say anything. Nobody could put into words what their feelings were really, and it was very, very quiet and subdued.
Did either of you go to the replay at Villa Park?
No, I think the replay was probably midweek in the evening, and our school commitments, our homework probably took. No, we didn't.
Okay. Better times at Wembley. What do you remember about the Wembley Cup Finals?
Well, going to them, I remember being very disappointed at the Crooktown result. I think in those days we were so used to winning everything, but you would look at the Northern Leagues. Was it the Northern Premier League that Crook played in? Northern League, and well, there are some good teams that do well in the FA Amateur Cup, and I was very disappointed. I was still young enough to probably be a bit tearful.
No,
I think.
I remember being really upset
Yeah.
because I felt that I didn't really feel that Enfield played that well, and they were obviously completely taken aback when Malcolm Mitchell was injured. And I just remember afterwards feeling almost as if I'd been cheated, which is not right.
And it seemed like that in those days, isn't it? Because if the goalkeeper was injured, then there were no substitutes, so they had to go off. Somebody else had to come in goal. You were playing with 10 men, and it just didn't seem fair. Certainly to a young boy, it didn't seem fair.
But Skelmersdale was better.
Skelmersdale was very much better, yes.
The first game, I felt both sides were very cagey, and it didn't seem a particularly eventful game until the penalty in the last minute of extra time. And I also agree with what Ken said, that you went within a minute from a feeling of despair to a feeling of elation, penalty being given and the penalty being saved. But the replay, I felt that Enfield played very well that day.
Comfortable victory, wasn't it?
Yeah, contained Skelmersdale very well and then attacked. The Dagenham game was great fun as well, because it was surprisingly for a cup final, a game where Enfield just played so well that Dagenham never had any chance, and it was 5-1.
How did you first become interested in football?
Well, I always liked kicking the ball around with friends, and certainly because my father took an interest, I suppose I followed his lead, and we saw games on the television. And I also like studying the statistics of football. So I think I was a bit of a reluctant reader. I was quite a perfectly good reader as far as I can remember, but I didn't read novels or storybooks as my mother wanted me to. But I did read the sports pages of the paper religiously, and got quite interested in just studying the league positions and the tables and so on.
I had an elder brother, and so we used to go in the park and play football. So I got involved that way, and watching the odd cup final on television and monitoring the results on a Saturday. And, yeah, I enjoyed playing, and I also enjoyed watching.